Hey, Jake with B&H. Today we're talking about run and gun filmmaking with high-end cinema cameras. I got Bobby and Doug here to help talk about it. Bobby just shot a fun little project. Why don't you tell me a little bit about that first?
The shoot itself was a reenactment of a World War I battle. So there's a group up in Massachusetts that do World War I reenacting. So I thought it would be cool to take a camera and go into literally the trenches.
Literal trenches?
The literal trenches.
Literal trenches of World War I?
Yes, that was the basis for the entire shoot.
Okay, and so you wanted to shoot this run and gun. Now, normally, you take a small mirrorless camera, put it on a gimbal, and just start running around.
That would have been the easy way to go. I could have taken
But you didn't want to do that?
Right. I like a challenge. So
what'd you use instead?
I chose the RED Gemini 5K instead of going, small DSLR mirrorless on a gimbal, just because of what a camera like that could offer.
Like what?
5K resolution, raw shooting, better color, higher dynamic range, and I just wanted it to look like a real movie.
That camera is a little larger.
It is.
Cumbersome.
Yes.
How do you wouldn't typically think run and gun, I'm gonna go grab my 5K Gemini.
Right, it is obviously a heavier camera, yeah. But, I feel like it was worth putting up with that. It didn't need that much really. I mean, I had, the handles and the shoulder mount, the V-mount battery, and the monitor, and that was it.
And that's all you needed?
That's all I really used. Ideally, I would have liked to have had a bigger EVF, but I just didn't have one. A lot of times, even when you're running gunning with smaller cameras, you don't have the benefit of using like a nice EVF. Sometimes you're just using the screen on the back of the camera. With this, I just had a slightly bigger screen.
Wow.
But it was sunny, and I had to deal with that.
So it was a bright, sunny day?
It was a very bright, sunny day, but it was mixed. It was cloudy, sunny, cloudy, sunny. So that also lended to me having to mess around with the settings a lot while I was moving. With the run and gun, like this, with the smaller cameras, you gotta move quickly. You can change your settings fast. So I kind of had to set up the camera so I could do that quickly as well. The bigger camera.
Do you remember what your ISO was?
Yes, my ISO was 800, which I believe is the native ISO of the camera for the best dynamic range. I was at 800 the whole time.
What kind of challenges did you face doing a run and gun style with this camera?
It was heavy, but it wasn't so heavy that I carried it around all day.
Yeah.
Pretty much. It is cumbersome. The batteries don't last as long as, let's say, a smaller rig.
A lot more juice that camera.
A lot more juice, and when you're shooting like with RED and their compression ratios, I was shooting at a 3:1 in 5K, so I was burning through mags every 35 to 40 minutes. So I had to be mindful of how much card space I had. Yeah. So there are a few things you have to pay attention to a little closer when you're shooting with a cinema rig like that, but I think the results are worth it.
Let's talk about the results. So when you first look at the footage, I remember you talked to me about how there were parts of the day where you were looking through your viewfinder and you couldn't see, because it was so dark and so harsh light, you couldn't see.
Yeah.
But all of a sudden you put the footage up on your computer, you're like, oh.
Yeah, I was trying to just look at the waveform and make sure I had the shot exposed that way as best I could. And then once I got the footage on the computer, gave it over to Doug, and then he took over in terms of color and post-processing.
All right, so speaking of working with the footage, Doug, how did you start manipulating raw data? Because you did shoot raw.
Yep.
You shot raw. How do you work with raw data?
So there are a few programs. I know that for at least in RED's case, the Gemini, they have Red Cine X, which is the standard way to go about processing that footage. But we just went straight into DaVinci. So I went into DaVinci Resolve, pretty much just opened the footage natively as supplied by Bobby, and it was pretty instant. I graded it with an ASUS, so it kind of just automatically took a look. And the colors out of camera are pretty nice. I'd say like most cameras, there's always a little finessing you have to do just to get it to look exactly how you want. And that's not even making a look, that's just getting like contrast levels right. But the shocking thing was how much you could save out of both the shadows and the highlights. I actually think Bobby's exposure was pretty good for the most part. There were only a handful of shots that were a little over, but even then, it was never over enough to clip or to really lose any of that detail. So I think the most challenging aspect was getting some of the shots that were very contrasty by nature. You have some backlit shots. There's that great shot of the guy with the hat just
Right,
him
right.
against, it's like a fairly close-up shot.
With the clouds.
Yeah, yeah, and the sky is actually still very colorful in the shot, so I'm guessing you exposed for the sky, roughly.
Right.
And so that means I had to kind of strike a balance. Now, normally when you do that with like a scene like that, that's pretty tricky to pull off in a realistic way, because you don't want to darken the sky too much and make it look this like, really unrealistic shade of blue, and you don't want to brighten the person up. So I was able to kind of get a good balance. That said, I didn't really want to deviate too much from what the camera produced natively, because we're kind of demoing it, we're testing it, so I didn't really go for a look that was too beyond what the camera produced. I didn't have any issues with compression or noise. You said 3:1?
3:1, except when the slow motion stuff was all 8:1.
Right, and actually on that note, so the slow motion stuff looked amazing, and I'm very used to dealing with smaller mirrorless cameras that usually the slow motion is a compromise.
Yeah, because you're sacrificing
Quite a compromise.
Yeah, usually resolution or frame rate or
Yeah.
something, but I was able to stay in 5K and then up it to 96. But the trade-off was just the change in compression from 3:1 to 8:1, and the camera forces you into that 8:1.
Yeah. Speaking of, so you color graded, and I think if I looked at the footage, it was relatively warm.
Yes.
By nature. However, you guys wanted to create a look as well for some shots.
Right.
So talk to me about how that came about.
Well, there was the idea that there would be a passage of time, and the conditions of the sky did change. So there are some shots that are, I would say actually the bulk of them I think are pretty brightly high key lit, but very contrasty from just high noon sun. And then you have some overcast shots, and those of course look soft, beautiful. But that gives you the chance to do a less sunny look, because if it's overcast, it could be anything almost, as long as you don't see the sky. So there are some shots that take place in those overcast moments where we went for a very blue, almost dusk or dawn type look.
Yeah, like early morning.
Yeah, early morning.
Yeah.
So it's not quite like a day for night thing, but it could conceivably have happened even if you do see the sky a little bit. It's got that really deep blue shadow and like kind of pinkish purple sky hue going on. And that's actually really nice to do with this footage, because it's raw, you have this gradation. You can just go to the smallest degree, like just a tiny bit more blue, tiny bit more magenta in some areas.
Really paints just
Yeah,
the colors.
yeah. And if you want to isolate things, which you might do in a situation like that, to remove certain colors or to exaggerate certain colors, it's much easier to grab and isolate those colors using footage like that.
Were you shooting with a LUT the whole time?
I was just using the in-camera monitoring
Okay.
LUT. Yeah, just so I could get like a exposure base for when I was shooting. And then even, because it was so bright, I was barely seeing the image anyway, so I was just looking at the waveform, just stick between the goalposts, and as long as I kept where I was shooting in there, the footage turned out to be...
Did you use ND filters?
No, because the camera does not have them built in,
Right.
but I did use them on the lens.
Okay.
So usually, like most cinema cameras at that level will have, like, you could just turn a knob and it'll just drop one in over the sensor, which is ideal, but it helped me decide which lenses to use, because initially I wanted to go out there with cine lenses, but most cine lenses with bigger barrels, they don't have threads on them to screw in. You got to do a drop in, then you got to add a matte box, and then it becomes a whole production.
Larger rig to handle.
Right, I didn't want to do any of that, so I chose lenses. I used the Canon Cine hybrids, like the Photo Cine hybrids that are declicked.
Cine Servo, I
Yes,
think.
the Cine Servos,
Servo.
right. There's an 1880 and then the 70-200, and they're small. They're actually pretty compact.
They're very compact, yeah.
Yeah, because I think they're like
Four, I think.
4.4, something like that.
Somewhere around there.
Anyway, they have threads for like 77mm filters, so I was able to use Vari NDs on the lens themselves. So that was just a quick. I went full manual for that, just so I can control everything quickly and exactly where I wanted the focus to pull. And then I would just mess with the ND filter a little bit if I wanted to have a more wide open aperture. But a lot of the times I was shooting with the 70 to 200, so I didn't really need to be wide open. I was able to hover where I wanted to. And then the depth of field was just, I was still getting very, shallow depth of field if I was at 150 or something.
So the goal here was to take a camera that you wouldn't normally use in this scenario and see if it would work.
Right, and the test proved valuable because you can use a camera like this in a situation like that. As long as you put the proper rigging on it, you can make it look really good, and you can make it work really well.
Not just the ergonomics, but the dynamic range of the camera.
That was my biggest thing, was going into that. Like, I knew that if it was cloudy all day, I'd be fine with any camera, but if it was sunny, I was gonna need something where I could pull detail out of shadows and keep highlights in check. And a lot of the smaller cameras just can't really handle that. They don't have the dynamic range to do that, but the RED did, so it was my choice.
It passed the test.
Passed my
It
test.
passed the Bobby test. It passed the
test.
Doug test. Passed the Jake test. Awesome. All right, I want to thank Bobby and Doug for a chat with me. This is B&H Film Crew. Thanks for watching, guys. Just keep rolling.